The following podcast is scheduled for one fall. Introducing first, the ace that runs the place, Sam Tate! And his tag team partner, Rob is Warren!
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our third edition of Scheduled for One Fall. My name is Warren Sprague. Let me introduce you to your host with the most. It is the ace that runs the place. It's Mr. Sam Tate. How are you, good friend of mine?
I'm doing absolutely swell, my friend, and it is still January, and it is still such a big topic, so it means it's still time for Royal Rumble talk. There's so much to cover this week.
Are we really going to be able to stretch this out into the 23rd, by the way? Like, we're recording this on the 16th, guys, and on the 23rd, we will still be before this year's Royal Rumble. I can't imagine us talking about this the whole month. Can we do it?
Well, next week is the speculation episode, right? That's the one where we focus on this year's Rumble. We focus on our predictions, our picks, things we want to see. We could always fantasy book this year's Rumble as soon as we knew the entrance, stuff like that.
Ooh, fantasy. Yeah, well, at the end of the day, I'm just excited to continue to really break down one of the most exciting matchups in professional wrestling because of that unique format of individuals running down to the ring and adding their power into an already established flow. And it's exciting to think that we're going to go over some of the real nitty-gritty favorites, favorite aspects of our different Rumble matches, right? Today, we're going to talk about our favorite Rumbles. We're going to talk about our least favorite Rumbles. And we're going to talk about who should have won but didn't. It should be a lot of fun, guys. So thanks for joining us. Would you say there's more bad Royal Rumbles in our history, or are there more positive and good ones? Tell me about it.
Well, considering we got the receipts from last week, I think there's definitely more bad than good. Part of that's a symptom from there being over 30 Royal Rumbles now. Part of that is it's a yearly thing. Part of that is the sheer inertia of moving forward through time, hurtling through space, and having to keep putting on Royal Rumbles every single year.
Sure.
It sounds like it's not that hard of a task, but if you have to come up with something unique every single year under the same format and the same premise, well, I mean, you've seen how repetitive weekly wrestling TV gets, so
sure. It's true.
It's
true.
And you can play with those formats every week. I mean, I talked to where the biggest issue that I've had with it is the stakes are you get to go to WrestleMania. So it's good to have stakes involved. It's good that it's important. But because of that, I think it takes away from some of the magic and the majesty of it. And I'll be honest, I think the biggest issue is the finale of Royal Rumbles. I don't think I'm a fan of the majority of winners. And while going back and researching for this episode, I found myself liking the actual Rumbles a little more for individual moments. Appreciating individual moments, but still being less than enamored with the entire spectacle of it. Especially when you do get those dud Rumbles, man, they drag on and on. Even some of the shorter ones are just like, I think the shortest Rumble ever is Sean winning 95? I'm probably wrong on the year, but it's just, it feels like one of the longest Rumbles because they've got like the Matador in there and so many joke characters come down, and it's memorable, but it's not a good one.
I empathize, but it sounds like the way you're kind of reviewing how Rumbles can be really celebrated in their moments as opposed to their whole. You got to think that that's a good comparison for professional wrestling as a whole as well, from what we talked about in episode 1, how it's all about those moments that are burned into your brain, or those spikes of emotion caused in those moments. Those are what make wrestling great. So in a way, the Rumble is a great kind of microcosm of wrestling culture, and it really captures both the surprise and the result And also the lows, of course. Yeah, there's definitely been some clunkers, and we'll be talking about that. I mean, as a matter of fact, I don't know about you, but I feel like we should just jump right into what we really don't like which rumbles just kind of sort of fell and didn't have much of an impact on us in any way, shape, or form. There were several, and I don't know about you, but when I was going through and reminding myself of what I might bring up in our conversation today, I was actually struggling to go too far back in time and watch the oldest of the Rumbles, where the Big John Studs win, or the Hacksaw Jim Duggins, which wasn't even a pay-per-view at the time, by the way, and Big John Studd didn't go to the main event at WrestleMania. That was before all the tropes had been established. So I'll have to admit,
test Rumble. That's the unofficial Royal Rumble.
Which one there? The Stud or the
Stud.
Saw? Yeah.
The Big John Studd. It's the test Rumble. I don't even think he's an official Royal Rumble winner.
He's definitely an official Royal Rumble winner. He's just one of the earliest ones. It just didn't have the same gravitas that it does now with all of the hoopla and the prestige that they've attempted to build into the format, Mm-hmm. So a lot of my worst ones, honestly, were more recent. Ones that I remember, feeling like I knew what was going to happen, or I could feel the momentum of the storytelling, and I was anticipating specific beats to come about, and then they never did happen, and arguably something worse did, A couple of the ones that I want to bring up first. How about this one? Not necessarily my worst, but one of the worst. 2017's Royal Rumble, the second one when that Randy Orton took. That one felt like he came out of left field, had no reason to be the guy at the end of the match with his arm raised, especially because he'd already done it before. And man, I had a really hard time enjoying going over my memories of that specific Rumble. Just very humdrum. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, and it's so funny because Randy did one of the few things that we talked about last week being something that we'd want to see, and not quite all the way, but like in his first Rumble win, his own faction Legacy helps him get to basically the final two. It comes down to like Legacy versus Triple H, and while Triple H is busy throwing out the Goon Squad over the top rope, Randy gets to sneak up and eliminate him, which is exactly the Goon Squad's job, right? And
right.
It's pretty rare, if ever, that's ever happened. And it's sad because it's the kind of thing where in my head, I'm like, that makes perfect story sense. And I love that. And then you actually watch it happen, and it just epitomizes why, like, having a climactic finish to a Rumble is so tough. Because all he does is just run up and throw him out, from behind. And I guess part of that people will say is supposed to happen because it's a heel winning. But then later on in 2017, where it's the year after Triple H wins, which is the year after Batista wins, and they're like, oh, well, we just got to hand it out to Evolution, I guess. Like, if Ric Flair came back for 2018, he would have won that Rumble.
Yeah, well, Ric Flair, for those who didn't know, powerhoused his way from the third spot through to the end of the Royal Rumble in 92. I think we did talk about that a little bit last year, and it was one of the greatest single-man performances in pro wrestling, that to its point, and won the title in that Rumble. And that Rumble was full of a lot of no-name guys, which is why they needed Ric Flair to be in there to pretty much add like very strong star power until the rest of WWE's top shelf stars came down in like the 20s. You know what I mean? And Ric Flair outlasting them all actually turned out to be a pretty darn good story. One of the better Rumbles, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and that one I think it's mostly remembered because you get to have the Ric Flair promo after it, which is a very Japanese wrestling thing, I guess, nowadays. But I think without that sick promo at the end, I don't know if people remember it quite as fondly.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely one that hasn't aged the best, but Rick's performance by itself still has a lot of value. There's some Rumbles where the winner comes in super late, right? And you feel like, boy, what a foregone conclusion. And I think Randy's was one of those in 2017, right? Mm-hmm. He was building up for the big WrestleMania match with Bray Wyatt, who was still the Eater of Worlds, finally had his first title win in the Elimination Chamber match. and then basically got jobbed out to Randy at WrestleMania with bugs crawling all over the canvas. One of the worst matches, right?
Yeah, how do you how do you change the entire arena? You know what I mean? Like how do you create a different terrain in which you fight in and still lose?
Oh man, yeah, it was just so lame, and I think it's because that match was so lame, and that Bray Wyatt was definitely somebody I've been behind for a long time, including that time period of super stoked to see him on top and get that win over Cena in the Elimination Chamber. Just a frickin' flop and give it up in a sad state, man. Just a sad state of a match. It's really hard for me to look at the 2007 Royal Rumble ever again and think, yeah, I want to relive that. There's nothing to relive. It was such an empty story that year for me. So what's one of the Rumbles for you that feels, notably anticlimactic?
We can't include the greatest Royal Rumble ever, right? That's not a real one. The 50-man Rumble.
The match is the match, you know what I mean? I think Titus O'Neil's trip and fall ending up halfway under the ring was better than the majority of the match. Yeah, you can certainly talk about it. Tell us about what made it weird. Braun won a
belt that he never wears, that no one ever cared about.
Right,
we all just swept under the rug, just like the Andre the Giant Memorial Trophy that no one ever does anything with. Mm-hmm. Just a fake accolade. But the Rumble I wanted to actually talk about was the 40-man Rumble, which at that time was the biggest Royal Rumble ever and was just bloated with extra superstars and I guess surprisingly few returns. It was cool to see Diesel again for a minute, but like not enough for him to soak up 10 minutes in a Rumble.
Right, sure. There weren't too many pops in that specific Royal Rumble. That was one of the ones where, yes, while it did kind of give the nod to somebody who was on the up and up, hadn't yet achieved anything to really make their resume stand out for Alberto Del Rio before he won it. The rest of the Rumble, you're right, felt pretty empty and hollow and not really like, who do you root for? When your guy who looks like he's going to win is a heel who doesn't yet have the crowd completely behind him and arguably never did, right? Or he'd still be employed. Then what is there to look forward to? You just kind of malaise your way through 40 men. You look forward to the largest version of the match, maybe. There's potential for more surprises and more fun and more memories. But, I think we can both look back on this specific Rumble and admit we don't remember much about it at all outside of that Diesel appearance, huh?
Yeah, well, that's, it's about moments and things you remember. And so those things are going to be biased a lot. And, a big bias for me is whoever wins the Rumble. I think pretty much every year that I've watched, aside from maybe 2, I felt like the wrong guy won, and I felt like Alberto Del Rio, who, again, I'm pretty sure was a world champion before he won this Rumble. Like, I'm pretty sure this was the era of guys who win the world championship and then next year win the Rumble, like Sheamus. I could be a little wrong on the time frame, but it wasn't, it was right around that era where Alberto Del Rio just decided to completely drop his character, become a plain white babyface for no good reason. Like, it was all just so weird. And when you have a lackluster finish, it can put a damper on an otherwise good Rumble. When you have a lackluster finish and a lackluster Rumble, it's just a recipe for disaster.
It's funny. I'm looking at the lineup for this 2011 Rumble, and you know who the first 2 were in order of entry?
Was it Ziggler and Jericho?
No. And
Ziggler
now, you know what?
No, that was 2010.
2011 was CM Punk.
Ooh, okay.
And Daniel Bryan.
Oh, that makes sense.
Doesn't that sound like a really fun way to start the match? Like it's too bad that it goes forgotten. But this was right at the precipice before the summer of Punk, and the real good years for him. And he was still straight edge society. And Daniel Bryan was just coming out of his Nexus phase. So we got like nerfed versions of them instead of their final forms. You know what I mean?
It's actually really funny how often those guys did face, and it like wasn't a dream match. It's actually kind of funny how many times they just threw away Punk versus Daniel Bryan because, you know, in their minds, I guess it just wasn't like the dream match that everyone thought it would be. And it is really interesting how often they did rub elbows both at that moment and at their peaks as world champions.
But even then, they're curtain jerking for this, a very important Rumble, right? Theoretically.
Well,
they were
curtain jerking the Rumble is a pretty important job, I would say.
I agree. Yeah, you often go on to anchor the entire first half of the match. It's not very common that the first two are quickly eliminated, but I believe in that story it was a pretty quick elimination for Daniel Bryan. Like Nexus gets involved pretty fast or something like that and starts cleaning house, which is cool. At least they try to tell a story to start up that match. But I'm looking up and down the list of participants, and it's like nothing but under mid-carders. I mean, David Otunga's, we've got Hornswoggle was in this one. We had, let's see, oh my goodness, there's so much crud. JTG, poor Shad Gaspard never got a Royal Rumble entry. I'm still looking for it in the history books anyway. Mason Ryan, like such trash. So much trash in this Rumble. There was really only the surprise you mentioned of Diesel. Right. And other than that, no one came out to really give you a reason to remember this. It's just too darn bad, if you ask me. And then, yeah, I think the biggest hype near the end of the match was that Santino Marella, of all people, looked like he had actually won the match for a split second before you get what you were referencing before with Randy Orton tossing out Triple H in 2009 in a heartbeat, right? Instead, it was Santino looking like he was winning before Alberto Del Rio came up from behind, dumped him, and everybody was like, oh, okay, well, I guess we're just happy to be here. So yeah, kind of a cruddy Rumble. It's a totally understandable one to talk about.
I am remembering now that this was before his first major championship, I guess, because you have the 2 world titles at the time. So this is before he won a major title, but the saving grace is that he did not win at WrestleMania. His first title championship actually came later. So I was wrong about that now that I'm rethinking all of the year of 2010, 2011 wrestling. But I can say that the best thing to come out of that Royal Rumble is that Alberto Del Rio lost at WrestleMania, which is not a super common thing for Royal Rumble winners.
You're right. Historically, it's pretty much a lock that if you win the Rumble, you're getting a chance with the belt as your prize. And why not? One of the most historically approved, at least for fans. I mean, I guess I should be careful here because it's not historically approved for everybody. Many Rumbles do get panned, but usually you're winning the Rumble because there's momentum behind you. The crowd enjoys you or they hate you enough to really warrant you the opportunity to lead the company for a while. And many times when they do gamble on these folks, it's really, really, really good. Other times it's been trashy, sure. And I remember, that being one of the Rumbles that, didn't have that effect. But there have been really good Rumbles that we've enjoyed a long time where that was also the case. And I'm sure we're going to touch on some of those here in a few moments. But another Rumble, I suppose, that I thought was kind of dirt was last year's Women's Royal Rumble. If you remember, this is one that Ronda Rousey won.
Yeah. The only thing I remember about that Rumble is that Ronda Rousey won for actually no reason.
Right. That's exactly what I was trying to say earlier with some of these Rumbles having entrants, or their winners, I should say, come in at a high number. This was Rousey coming in at 28. And usually the Women's Royal Rumble match is filled with reasonable decisions, things that I can enjoy. We were talking how they are doing a good job of these first several Women's Rumbles really actually being quality, opportunities to put over somebody, or at least being a good freaking match. And this had some surprises. Starting off with Melina at number 2. I'm looking at this. Kelly was in here. She's had several of those cameos. I think this was the year that Cameron, as in Naomi and Cameron, the Funkadactyls or whatever, Cameron returned, which nobody asked for, but she looked better in the ring than she had ever done in the past. But it was all to build up to Rousey's entrance at 28. And by that point, there really wasn't a whole lot of quality content left except to dump out Shotzi and Shayna and all of those other late bloomers. And it's like, okay, cool, whatever, way to go. At least Sasha Banks at number 1 had a nice long run, if I remember correctly. Any thoughts on this Rumble?
Man, it's a crime. It's a crime that there's only been, 4 or 5 women's Rumbles at most, and there's just nothing good about that one. You get a couple, maybe like a feel-good return or two, but man, that one's just in the trash.
The reality is it had most of the women's roster that was part of the company at the time in it. And at the same time, they squished in a lot of surprises. Ivory made a return, and Summer Rae was back, which again, like who asks for Summer Rae? Not very many people. No offense to Summer Rae, but she didn't ever get a foothold of doing anything interesting in WWE whatsoever. And we had both Bellas show up because that's pretty much part of the canon at this point. Yeah, I mean, it was predictable, paint by the numbers, and then a crappy end, for sure. I couldn't help but at least bring that one up. You've got to have a couple more in your basement, though. I mean, I can't be the only one who finds several of these terrible. As a matter of fact, I know I'm not. Give me another one for you that just didn't do anything but clunk.
Well, I mean, I find most of them below par, right? So I don't have too many there. Strictly in my basement, I guess, just because I think that the Rumble is you're looking to pick and choose moments, and for me personally, I want to judge even an hour-long match like the Rumble based on like its merits. But like, I'm gonna be really controversial with you here.
Okay, I want you to hurt my feelings.
Yeah, do you remember which year Rey Mysterio won the Rumble?
What? You mean 2006? The one where he went from coast to coast at number 2?
Right.
All the way to the end of the Rumble? Are you gonna put that one in your basement?
It's pretty bad overall. People just really like the Rey Mysterio story, but they put him at number 2 to specifically juxtapose the winning from number 1 spot, just so he could set a new record, just so he could eliminate the history of Chris Benoit. It's just a fraudulent Rumble overall.
Ooh, I mean, okay. Controversy. It's true. 2004's Royal Rumble's actually making the list of one of my favorites. It was the first one I got to watch from beginning to end, and that was the Chris Benoit victory. And I don't even want to touch on that at this moment. But you're right. 2006's was we have to get rid of him. We have to delete the memory of somebody from our history. Let's give somebody else truly beloved who does have a rocket fire of a story with real emotional ties that so many of the fans can connect with. Let's give him the nod and have him go through 2 of WWE's top guys, established Randy Orton, Triple H, in order to do it. I mean, sure, you can say that it was intended to wipe away the memory of Chris Benoit, because even at the time, I think I recognized that too as a young fan. But that match was stellar. It had a great stage. It had Rey Mysterio escaping so many dangerous situations. Triple H was in there helping to anchor the whole thing for the majority of the match, if I'm not mistaken. And Randy looked like he was the young gun who could spoil the dream, right? He legitimately looked like the guy and felt like the guy who could shock us and win the thing instead of the hero we were cheering for. It's so hard for me to agree that wasn't one of the best ones in history. I got to get the list of people who participated too, man. That was a who's who at the time.
Yes, the who's who of Trevor Murdoch, Sylvan, Viscera, The coach is in that Rumble, right?
Yeah, he was numbered. I think he was one of the late arrivals. I mean,
So the thing I remember the most
he
about
wasn't.
this Rumble is the lead up to it involving so many wrestlers I just didn't care for at the time. A lot of guys I really liked had passed away or moved on from the company. At the time they were like trying to bring back ECW as a brand, or this is like right before that, I guess. I just remember Joey Styles doing commentary for this Rumble. I was gonna rewatch it.
God!
I was going to rewatch it as part of my research, to challenge my notions and my beliefs. I think I got like 6 minutes into it before it was just like it was too many commentators for a big part of it. Like they had all the SmackDown and Raw guys together. They had Joey Styles there. So it's one of the worst commentary rumbles of all time. That's a huge part of it.
Okay.
A lot of the guys I'd really have liked to watch were not in it because at this time pulling double duty was not a normal thing. That becomes really normal later, which I don't really like either. I don't really like the idea that there's a Royal Rumble where Seth is in a tag team championship match later, and the opponents are like, they were in the Rumble, and like 3 out of 4 people are pulling double duty. I think that's when he was tag champions with Jason Jordan. It's like 2017, 18, somewhere in there.
Wow.
Yeah, like there's like weird stuff. So like. No one's pulling double duty from like the big names I want to watch, like Kurt Angle. I was still a Triple H fan at the time, coming off the heels of Evolution. It's right before like my like the worst part of the Triple H career, in my opinion. But
okay,
he was still one of the guys I wanted to watch, so he's not in it.
Triple H?
He is in it. I'm sorry.
He lasted the whole way with Ray, which was a lot of fun.
I'm thinking of a different year than where he wasn't actually. I'm thinking that's the one where it was John Cena and Edge. That's right. John Cena and Edge were feuding for the title. My bad. This is why I should have actually watched it, but I just couldn't.
You're forgiven. I mean, I'm looking up and down the list, and yeah, there are names that need to be in Rumbles, like Kane and Big Show, and Ric Flair's there, sure, but we're talking about Grandpa Flair, right?
No, that's the one where Triple H almost goes 1 to 30, and the whole time it's just him and Ray just biding their time, laying on the ground. I think it was the first Rumble as a kid where I remembered thinking like, these guys aren't actually doing much. But it's because they were focusing the commentary so much on them while they're trying to like rest up, Well,
maybe that was smart. I mean, again, the biggest thing that felt like an obstacle to Rey Mysterio's victory were guys like Triple H who start from 1, just like Chris Benoit did. So obviously Triple H could be that guy to delete history and bury. I mean, smart choice there to book him at number 1. And then Randy Orton was number 30, and nobody had won the Rumble at number 30, I think, until the year after this, as a matter of fact, when the Dead Man won at number 30. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. Really, really interesting. Like, that was the 3 stories right there. Randy at 30, Trips at 1, and Ray at 2. And thankfully they did the right thing and picked the hero that most of us wanted to see win that match, win it. The fact, I get as a Triple H fan, maybe it would have been cool to see him be the one to delete that piece of history, but he had just won it 4 years prior. And while that's not off limits, as we've seen with guys like Hulk Hogan, I believe Shawn Michaels and Austin, all winning back to back, it just felt like it was the best decision by far in my heart for Ray to win. But yeah, otherwise a pretty nondescript Royal Rumble experience. You look at the card, like nobody really stood out as somebody who could legitimately win, and many of the guys who could were really early on. The Big Shows, the Lashleys, the Canes, except for Randy and Shawn who were late. But yeah, we've already done plenty to point out why this was just kind of unfun. Fair enough.
Yeah. Also just to put a cap on it, I guess, because you don't want me to shit on it too much. and I'm sure you'll talk up the good parts of it later, but like there was hardly any cool special returns. Like I think RVD might have taken a sabbatical from WWE, but it couldn't have been that long. So making a return in the Rumble wouldn't have been a big deal. And then what was it, like the Road Warriors and Tatanka? Like,
Right. Yeah. Road Warrior Animal was in this, and he had, you know, Hawk had passed away already, unfortunately. So why have Animal in the frickin' Royal Rumble except to, you know, I think he was kind of touching around the Heidenreich stuff around that time. You know what I mean? Or looking for somebody to be have a new partner.
Yeah, because it immediately becomes okay for the gimmick infringement as long as the original gimmick owner shows up and tags with you one time.
Well, you know, you have a point. Tatanka being one of the surprise returns is like, who? You know, I'm not, of course it's a crap Rumble overall as far as the suspense is concerned, but it's because Triple H and Rey Mysterio are still in the thing, and their story is so, I mean, like I said, tale of three stories. For me as a fan, I was just sitting there crossing my fingers as hard as I could for Ray, and they kept doing a good job of going back to him and having him escape specific individuals who seem like they're poised to take him out. And that's what got my hope up, right? They were doing a good job with that, and they've done such a good job of building up hope around guys winning the Rumble and then, you know, tearing your heart out in the last moment that you just gotta expect Triple H or any of these other, you know, crap heels, Orlando Jordan, Chris Masters, you know, late bloomers. I know there's a lot of nobodies in this match. It's true. Like a lot of people who couldn't potentially win because they're just too far from the top of the card. But that's kind of the whole point. Was that Ray had been treated to that point, like outside of his affiliation, his fantastic feuds with Eddie, you know, he was still a cruiserweight. He was never going to get the heavy consideration for a world championship run. Never. Not in Vince McMahon's I like beef WWE, right? So it was just such a paradigm shifting, emotionally justifying win for him that it eclipses a lot of trash. But you're right. I'll give it to you. There's plenty of trash.
Yeah, it was just too close. Like they just had a guy win from number 1 2 years prior. You know, there's just too much going around it that didn't make it feel organic, and that's why it's one of my least favorite to watch. It reminds me of all these things adjacent to it that I really liked that I no longer had anymore.
We all say unpopular things from time to time, and speaking of unpopular things, I think universally, as I was reading through all of the different Rumbles in history and which ones sucked especially, one of the ones that was always near the top of people's shit list was the 1999 Royal Rumble.
What?
You might remember this one as the year.
So good.
Ooh,
What?
I love this. You like that Rumble, huh? Guys, this is the one Vince McMahon won.
Yeah,
like,
honestly, I'm a finish guy. I'm an ending guy.
Okay, well, sure. I mean, sure. There's so many good endings, like the Rey Mysterio ending. Vince McMahon spent most of this match on commentary, if I remember correctly, because he was coming out at number 2 to Steve Austin's number 1. Because everybody had expected perhaps for Steve Austin to win his 3rd straight Royal Rumble, and why not? He's the red hottest star in arguably the industry at the time. And he was hell bent on getting his hands on McMahon, who, you know, had foolishly allowed himself this situation to be in the Rumble. Of course, McMahon does the clever thing. And, you know, you'll probably like that, right? We love it when guys dodge the reality of the Rumble or the kayfabe of it, actually, ironically, the opposite of reality, that he just didn't get into the match and kept himself separate from most of it for the all up until the end of the show, basically, and spoiled Austin's 3rd win in a row. So I find it to be an understandable submission to most people's bottom, because, you know, why would Vince McMahon, the chairman, win the WWE championship over their number 1 star? But I also respect where you're coming from for the garbage storyline, right? So tell me what about 1999's Rumble outside of this fantastic ending, or actually go ahead, tell us what did you love about the ending?
So, well, I want to start at the beginning because the beginnings of Rumbles is something I wish we could just do a whole 2 hours on, like a whole podcast on. But, going through and watching just like the first 5 minutes of every Rumble, just to do that would be insane. However, a lot of the best stuff from a Rumble that we forget about is the first two entrants. And the first two entrants was Steve Austin and Vince McMahon. You can't go wrong with Steve Austin and Vince McMahon. Like, it's never good wrestling, and it never has to be, because it's just Vince McMahon getting his ass completely whipped, like, every single time. And then, miraculously by the end of it, like, the best part of the Vince and Steve feuds, like, every fight that they have, is that there's some great twist ending where the guy who has the upper hand all of a sudden loses it because he fucked around and he found out,
Mm-hmm.
And this is a match that starts, and I get why people panic, because, like, there's a lot of really, like, non-notable, not rememberable characters, or, like, characters in, like, their worst gimmicks ever, but, like, as Steve is just beating the shit out of Vince, other people show up and Steve Austin just eliminates them because he's Steve fucking Austin in a Royal Rumble. Guys like Draws or, Mabel or Steve Blackman or whoever fucking, there's,
This was this is definitely another bookend Rumble. You're right. Where like all the stories packed at the beginning and packed at the end. There isn't a whole lot in between. A lot of these guys are no names. You're totally right. We can run down the list. I think everybody's a mid-carder. Yeah, everybody.
And while, Austin's just tossing them out, Vince tries to escape under the ropes, which that's always like a fan favorite when a guy is cheeky enough to abuse the rules, again, like, you got to fight around the stipulation. You have to utilize the unique rules of every match, whether it's a cage match, whether it's a over-the-top battle royale, whatever it is. And Vince escapes and they fight through the crowd. How many Royal Rumbles have a brawl through the crowd? They fight throughout the whole arena. Like, they fight in a bathroom, I think, at one point. I might be getting that one confused, but they're fighting throughout the whole arena. Like, when has that ever happened since in a Royal Rumble?
Well, I know, not commonly. I mean, I'm glad that you can look back at this one and have a differing opinion, because, I mean, I can understand why most people kind of find the 1999 Rumble garbage. There's so much mid-card, and it's all about just expecting Austin to win, only for Vince to totally screw over the top talent in the industry. And that result alone makes it memorable and hateable for at least a good reason in wrestling, wrestling terms.
Fuck Simon Dean. Give me Gilbert coming to the ring. Give me a real parody of a fucking wrestler coming to the ring. There was a lot of fresh names and a lot of people who wouldn't, like, make their name to be known. But there was other storylines. There's, like, The Undertaker and, like, the Acolytes or the Ministry of Darkness, I guess. I shouldn't say the Acolytes specifically yet. I don't know where we are in this timeline, but, like, the Ministry of Darkness is, like, kidnapping people at this point. I don't know.
Right.
There's actually things happening that have consequence in this Rumble, and it's not like a bunch of great wrestlers showing up, but spoiler alert, nobody does great wrestling in the Royal Rumble unless you're literally the last four guys. And even then, if it's the last four guys, you've got some mix of fucking overrated 5 Moves of Doom style wrestlers,
I mean, if you're using ministry interference, eliminating individuals as a means to bump up the quality of a Rumble, then
not eliminating.
Hell, 2011 with Nexus and all their stupid, like, gain up and throw out.
It's not the fact that they eliminated them. It's that they progressed their storylines. It's, when the Wyatt family would kidnap people, they wouldn't do anything with them, and they would just forget about it, or they would just turn on them 2 weeks later.
Sure. Yeah.
What I'm trying to remember. What didn't you like about it? What do you hate about it? Just that it's a bunch of mid-card guys?
Oh no, I'm not. you know, like I said, this as I was doing my research, this was the Rumble that so many people panned, and I totally get it. What makes it a WWE Royal Rumble result? Like, I totally understand. Vince screws over the top star in the industry, and a non-wrestler wins the Rumble. Like, I get it. That is not crappy. I mean, looking at the lineup, what would have been cool, could have been cool, just wasn't part of the storytelling at the time because Austin was the freaking focal point of the whole industry. I keep saying that, but it's real. So, like, everything was going to be about whether he wins or how he loses, and the most ridiculous way imaginable for wrestling fans, Vince McMahon winning, was the perfect way for him to lose, especially when he's billed at number 2, when in reality he spends 3 minutes in the match until he ends up winning it, right? So, like, I get it. I get it from a wrestling standpoint. I totally understand. So I'm glad that you're somebody who can argue to its validity and its place in the Royal Rumble lore as anything outside the basement, just for some fun, because most people hate this thing.
You want memorable, you want Hallmark. China was in this Rumble.
Yep.
I don't know
Number
if it's the
30.
first time she showed up in the Rumble, but I think it is.
It could be. It could be. I mean, China wasn't with us as long as people seem to think she was, right? I think maybe 98 she could have debuted actually in that. I'm just going to pull up 98's participants. That was the second year Austin won, unless history is totally failing me in my noodle.
It involved Steve Austin driving an ambulance. If Steve Austin drives a vehicle, minimum 4 stars. Steve Austin can drive anything.
That's hilarious. I love it. Minimum 4-star match if you're behind the wheel of a vehicle, Mr. Austin. I dig it. Looking at 98, I can't help it. I want to see if there was a little bit of China in that one.
Right?
What's that?
We're talking about 99, right?
Well, I mean, we were talking about 99. You had mentioned how China was in the Rumble, and you're looking
to see, okay.
I was looking to see if she debuted in 98 in that Rumble, and I don't think she did, as I'm looking through the list of participants. I think she probably got into the 99, and I think she also showed up in 2000, but I'm sure we're going to talk about the 2000 Rumble in a minute. For me, as one of my favorites, to be honest, and it's not because The Rock won, it's just because that was the Rumble that was featured in WWF No Mercy, my favorite freaking wrestling content thing ever, right? Mm-hmm. And that was the one that had so many fun little moments. It did try to tell the story of a dominant, early participant with Rikishi kind of running the table on so many entrants after he entered at number 4. And that was also one of the weird Rumbles where there were 2 low card guys, middle low card guys, starting off the Rumble with Grandmaster Sexay and D'Lo Brown. You can't think of too many Rumbles where, guys who aren't likely to be the focal point of the storytelling are starting off the match. And that's when Rikishi got to come in and kind of take that spot. And I thought that was a lot of fun. I just remember it being a really fun Rumble in 2000. And I'm looking to see if China shows up in it just for fun. She does, number 17. I was right about that. I don't think she was with the WWE in 2001, though those were her 2 years, her 2 extremely important years, 99 and 2000. Are we ready to turn over to 2000 for real? Or do you want to talk more about 99?
Well, I mean, I would just like more examples of why it's so dog shit, because everyone seems to, like you said, it's a critically panned one, but yet no one ever really has a reason for it other than, like their reasons for critiquing this Rumble are always the same as every Rumble. It's a bunch of, mid-card jobber guys not fucking doing shit. Like, that's normal for every Rumble. And the fact that you want to move on from it just, I think, proves my point that it's not that bad. It's just, if you don't like the 1999 Royal Rumble, you either didn't grow up, you didn't watch the product at that time. So, like, going back, watching it in a time capsule doesn't really work with any part of wrestling for the most part. Or you just have a YouTuber who gave you that opinion.
I like I said, bud, I already gave you validity to why it wasn't a crappy outcome. I think we've been talking about it for 10 minutes already. So I just thought we've kind of beaten the dead horse.
Good,
but,
we should, because people on the internet are wrong and they need to know that they're wrong. I need to be the YouTuber that gives you this opinion.
I don't watch YouTube opinioners enough to give a shit. You know what I mean? Like, I have my own opinion and I'm okay with it. I don't need to piggyback everybody. I generally love everything about wrestling. You know, I can find the entertainment value and the storytelling validity somewhere in most of these matches. And there's it's a perfectly understandable storytelling payoff in this one. It's just not what the fans wanted. And and the match itself, my dude, like, I'll tell you what, let's play high, middle, and low. I'm going to name the wrestler and you tell me where on the card they were. Okay.
All right. At the time or like in my head? Like my opinion or in reality?
Fun. As fun as that would be to spend the next 30 minutes breaking down why Goldust to you is a main eventer, or, you know, Ken Shamrock could have been world champion. I would like you to go back in time in your memory and tell me where they were at that time. Okay? Ready? High card, mid card, low card. Round 1. Golga.
I knew. Well, that's the third entrant, right? It's low
what
card. They're all low card guys. That's the issue. No one wants to admit anybody's a low card guy nowadays.
The best they had were medium card. Like, could they win? Maybe, but boy, is it out of left field because of the way things are going, guys. Like, Kane, sure, he was number 18. Triple H, number 23.
Kane, who got taken out of the Rumble by asylum workers. Kane, who they protected by having, you know, who kept the storyline alive. Kane, rather than, you know, I'm just saying, you got the same percentage of low card, mid card to high card in this Rumble as other Rumbles. It's very similar.
Bullshit. There's so much trash as far as the card.
Where would you put
concerned.
Val Venus? Where would you put Val Venus at this time?
Mid card, solidly. Like, he was one of the guys who were coming up around that time.
He was being groomed for a main event run shortly after this. He was like high mid card.
I mean, if by shortly after this you mean 2004 when they had nobody else to put next to Eric Bischoff.
No, I'm talking like when he feuded with Rikishi.
Oh, you're right. That was peak Venus, but yeah. I can't
Don't
remember
ever
what
say
derailed.
peak Venus on this podcast ever again.
Peak Venus. I don't know, dude. Like, I was a Val Venus fan back in the day too, if only because he seemed like he had so much potential. He played his character so well. His character was over with a very rare demographic to get over with the ladies. And
was it crowd noise? I mean, was it? Again, it might be like hindsight because I was like 10 at the time, but
high and tie.
I've never come across any women who were into Val Venus. They're usually into guys like Drew McIntyre.
You son of a bitch. The Blue Meanie was in this. Basement card. Okay? Kurgan. Boo. Like, I'm sorry, my dude.
The
like,
Blue Meanie was over
listen to me,
with
if
ECW
you
fans.
Don't like the 2006 Royal Rumble and its top heavy, low heavy storytelling approach, then that's why 99 has an argument for being just as trash. Because all of the story was at the peak and at the valley, at the beginning and at the end. It's a similar format. So the only problem is instead of giving it to the biggest babyface in the room, they give it to the biggest asshole. So, like, the most ridiculous asshole in Vince McMahon in most wrestlers' eyes. So, okay, if you can argue the validity of 1999, then welcome back to 2006, where the Rumble actually has a satisfying end.
Does it though? Go back and watch the final
if you enjoy being happy in life,
it doesn't make sense why Orton and Triple H would team up. It doesn't even make sense with that Royal Rumble.
I mean, it doesn't matter, right? Because everybody builds their alliances and tears them down in the Rumble for one night only, and sometimes it does have the ramifications of ending friendships and changing directions for people. But, I mean, how much more do you want to talk about this?
I don't.
Good. God damn. Let's talk 2000. All right. 2000 was such a good year. It's in Madison Square Garden. It has the really unique, how the ring format is, or the entranceway format is in Madison Square Garden. They've got the little doorway with the rusted metal freaking flaps. I don't know what else to call them. And there's a taxi draped over the top of it. It's so 90s New York. It's so fun. The whole card was really good, right? This was the night that kicked off with a tables match, if I'm not mistaken, between the Hardys and the Dudleys. And tables everywhere. It was elimination style, right? I mean, such a good match. That's the night Kurt gets choked out by Taz, who debuts. Like, Mae Yun shows her puppies in the bikini contest, right? Like, this is legendary, grade A.
Why would you finish with that?
I don't know, because, again, you want to talk about moments getting burned into your brain. Imagine renting that VHS as your first wrestling tape after finally getting to be allowed to watch wrestling. And that was the first one I went out and got at Hollywood Video. Was Rumble 2000, because I had recognized the set at this point and all the characters from No Mercy. And it was the match that made me a fan. So like this whole pay-per-view, Royal Rumble 2000 gets one of my nods as one of the finest nights for Royal Rumble lore. And yeah, The Rock wins at the peak of his popularity when they should be giving Royal Rumble wins to the peaking baby face, right? And there's just a lot of fun segments. Rikishi fought too at number 5, tossing out Grandmaster Sexy and Scotty 2 Hotty after doing their dance, right? He had already cleaned Mosh out. He'd already cleaned Christian out. And don't. I know what you're going to say. You like it because Mosh is in it? Fuck off. No, Mosh and that, I know, another basement Carter, but at least he was number 3 instead of half this match being filled with nobodies. The 2000 Rumble was solid. It had so many guys who were at least fun to watch. They did a good job with the Rikishi start. And then, momentum started to sort of slide around, and there was a couple people who could do well. Chris Jericho was here. Chyna was back. At least at the time she had momentum. Big Show came in at 26. Obviously, he was the second to last one eliminated. Bradshaw got a rare late entry, which I appreciated, I think this was one of the nights where, guys were doing double duty. It's weird, huh? You touched on that earlier, but some Rumbles, the rest of the card is excluded from the Rumble, and some of them, they do come in and fill the void a little bit. Can't remember if that was a year where APA had a match before the Rumble, but anyway, Kane, another late contender. It was a fun one. It was the definition of a fun Rumble at a time when you want them to be fun, right? Especially for me, a young kid getting into wrestling. 2000 was a good one. I probably didn't do enough job to justify it, though. Go ahead. Tell me it's shit.
It's just, whenever I look back at this Royal Rumble, I get enamored with all the other stuff you mentioned. This is the first time we've really talked about the rest of the card, and it's because the rest of the card is so stacked. It's got, my favorites at the time, the Hardy Boys versus the Dudleys in the table match. And, I don't remember it being the best of their contests, but I mean, there was a bunch of matches between these two teams. And so I'm a huge fan of stuff like that. I'm a huge fan of the Triple H and Cactus Jack street fight. I loved that.
Oh,
feud.
Yeah. Yeah. Who wouldn't?
And I think that Royal Rumble is cool because of the same reason you panned 99. It's cool because it's bookended. It's got a good beginning. It's got interesting character work in the beginning. Like Kai and Tai, they weren't even part of the Rumble, right? They just kept showing up and getting thrown out.
Yeah, hilariously coming in, trying to disrupt stuff, and just getting launched out. And in the case of Takumi Shinoku, taking one of the nastiest concussion bumps I've seen in the years that I've been a fan. Owie.
Ooh. Well, I don't remember that part, but I do remember them just bushwhacking their way in and out of the Rumble over and over. I remember Rikishi turning on his tag team partners after dancing with them.
Right.
And I don't really remember anything else until we get to the Final Four. And I like this Final Four a lot. The Rock, Big Show, Kane, and X-Pac, if I'm not totally fucking mistaken, because I know X-Pac and Kane did a ton of shit together at this time.
And X-Pac was number 30 into the match, so he'd have to be one of those final ones. And X-Pac for a second, right around this time, for a second, and going into 2001, seemed like somebody who was going to be utilized every week no matter what. So maybe he's somebody who can be randomly anointed and like, wow, look at that. They gave it to in this case, a light heavyweight. Pac was pretty popular around that time.
Interesting. Yeah, I remember I was the only person I knew who was a fan of X-Pac, so I don't think I've ever met another X-Pac fan in my life, actually.
He was just one of those guys who was working so hard to get over that you could smell it. But he's
the only DX member besides Triple H who I felt like really did stuff outside of DX, both before and after. Like, he had a career with other superstars and other feuds. Everyone else just kind of floundered to always be associated with either the New Age Outlaws or China.
Okay. I would say he was working as hard as he was working because he was the smallest member in the clique, even smaller than Shawn Michaels. So when all of the other guys in your backstage, posse are twice your size and, accumulating legacy points with their characters, whatever, like X-Pac was needing to provide as much flash and attitude and personality to his character in order for him to get over. And
he just had a cool moveset.
He had a great moveset.
He was one of the few people doing, spinning back kicks and was it the Bronco Buster is a huge crowd favorite.
Yeah.
So much that Rey Mysterio stole it. So going back to 2006 again.
Or as I like to call the Bronco Buster, the reverse stink face.
Right. He had like a miniature martial arts kind of a gimmick. He had some like martial arts striking he decided to slap in there. One of the first guys I've ever seen just do an enziguri and not afraid to grapple and do suplexes and stuff. So X-Pac always made everyone else look like $1 million, and he fit weirdly well with the Big Show and Kane in this Final Four. Still a lot of like DX interference style shit around this time. Like still a bunch of people, still a lot of them just, I don't know, involved with each other, I guess. Although this is like the end of it with the McMahon-Helmsley era. Like it's not real. I don't think it was even DX at the time, but it was a good Final Four. I don't look back too fondly on this Rumble myself.
Right. I know it's one of those things for me that's just pure nostalgia points that I gotta put it here in a discussion of my favorites because it was the root of much of my fandom. Memories of that VHS, man. Like I can't. It's just one of those, like, it's one of the finest pay-per-views in my personal library, just for me. So I couldn't help but talk about it for a second. I wouldn't blame you if you wanted to maybe bring up another Rumble that you would call a sentimental favorite, maybe.
Real quick before we move on, I do want to get your opinions on WrestleMania 2000's main event, because like the Royal Rumble 99, I hear a lot of people talk shit about WrestleMania 2000's Fatal 4-Way main event, a McMahon in every corner. This is, of course, a way to sort of screw The Rock out of his Royal Rumble win, because typically it's supposed to be one-on-one. We've had more and more triple threats as time goes on. But this was a Fatal 4-Way at WrestleMania for the title involving the Royal Rumble winner. How did you feel about that main event?
Here's what's funny about the 2000 WrestleMania is that it is trivia time. It is the only WrestleMania in the history of WrestleManias that doesn't have a single one-on-one men's match. If you look up and down the card, it's all gimmicky. It's all, the freaking main events, the Fatal 4-Way. It's all like different. So just a fun fact about WrestleMania 2000. And I remember it being maybe peak Attitude Era in a way. I know 2001 was definitely better. WrestleMania 17 is, if not the best WrestleMania, then it's definitely number 2 or 3 for most people. But what did I think about the main event? I thought it was fun because it was different in its format. I liked the 4 characters that were paired up with their McMahons. I liked that everybody had a McMahon. I liked that every McMahon had weight in their story. And it was a feud just as much between the McMahons as it was between Mick, Trips, Rock, and Big Show. And those 4 guys in the same ring at the same time, totally fine with it. Like Big Show Big Show certainly got his just desserts when it comes to, resume accolades. But at this time, he hadn't yet, right? Had not yet captured the WWE Championship. So it was a cool thing to have 2 guys who hadn't done that yet, if I'm not mistaken, with 2 guys who, built each other's reputation up together in Mick and Triple H. So I guess it's nondescript, isn't it? I guess the short answer, long answer is I didn't find it offensive. I didn't find the night, something that I would dislike, but do I find it especially memorable? No, not especially in history. I think Triple H ends up winning that Fatal 4-Way, of course, right?
Yes, it's the Vince turn. So yeah, Vince. One of the things I liked about the end of the '99 Rumble was The Rock came out and helped Vince McMahon, and then a year later, when The Rock wins the Rumble, Vince screws The Rock.
Nice long-term storytelling there. I totally respect that, actually.
Yeah, and he aligns himself with Triple H, and he's like, you know what? It's actually okay that you drugged my daughter and and married her, because it turns out she was lying about that to get at me. And, I respect that as a piece of shit devil. So.
Fair enough. I'm going to go ahead and rekindle my memory of what 2000 was like, watching just a 60-second review of everything that happened. Hardcore Holly winning the hardcore title, Test and Albert getting a win. We got some ladders, we got some tables, we got some Hardys through tables. I think this is TLC, one of the TLCs, which is just, how can you not love that? Got a little bit of Mae Young and Fabulous Moolah, hanging out with Terry Runnels. That was probably terrible. We got China hanging out with Too Cool, Rikishi and Kane. I mean, look at all this cartoon crap. Pete Rose gets Rikishi's ass in their face. We get Fatal 4-Way, people getting eliminated, Big Show out by Rock. Mick Foley loses to Trips. Vince gets involved, screws over The Rock. Yeah, like you said, decent long-term storytelling. And then the agreement between Stephanie and Vince McMahon that Triple H is the best option moving forward, which establishes, several years of Triple H's dominance, honestly, and certainly cements his long-term main event status. And helps establish Rock and Triple H as an incredibly important rivalry. Not that they weren't already. I think that rivalry really started in '97. So by this point, they've had plenty of history together. I don't know. What's not to like? It's fine. I don't understand why maybe it would be among fandom's basement as far as the WrestleMania to pay off the Rumble. But maybe 2000 is one of those years that can do no wrong for me, because of where that was in my wrestling fandom. Go ahead.
I also wanted to burst your bubble because Big Show was a WWF champion right before that Royal Rumble. So once again, it's never about making a star. It's only about people who have been champion pretty much.
Oh, that's true. And The Rock had been a champion by then, huh? Had he? I actually
don't remember for The Rock. I'd have to assume that The Rock was, but yeah, I know The Rock was champion in '99 because he comes out and he shows the belt to Austin to distract him, and that's how Vince eliminates him. And then a year later, Big Show wins the title for like a week just so he can transfer it to Triple H.
Okay, well, all right. I can see how historically this could be a weak Rumble. I have rose-colored glasses for the time frame, but I will say it was entertaining. The Rock is still The Rock. I'm not saying that makes him like, top 5 greatest wrestlers of all time or anything like that. But The Rock.
You know what the best part about that whole thing, the Royal Rumble to WrestleMania 2000, that whole time period, you know what the absolute best part about it, so I can look back on it fondly, is?
As long as what you're about to say is the segue into our next Rumble discussion, then I'm ready for it. Go.
Well, it'll be the capstone, but it's the fact that The Rock did not win at WrestleMania 2000.
The trend continues. I guess, let's take a break from discussing the Rumble specifically for just a second so I can get that article up that reminds us of everybody who made it through the gauntlet but couldn't seal the deal with their WrestleMania win, right? It is a fun trope that has popped up in WrestleManias, especially as time has gone on, because historically it was like statistically, I remember, those wonderful by the numbers packages WWE produces?
Yeah, those are. I was watching some of those, on the network, getting prepared for these podcasts, and it's actually kind of sad because, like, at the time, they're a great hype builder. In retrospect, it's like, oh, this is just all invalid.
Well, it's all fabricated statistics, sure.
Yeah, years later, it's just like it's not even like interesting because your brain starts thinking of all the ways these are incorrect now.
In a way, it's true, but at the time, what it does is it actually gives you a peek into the storytelling strategies, right? The more they delve into numbers and the more they point out, well, this number has the most Royal Rumble winners ever. It's like, oh, okay, thanks for just tipping your cap to your own methods here, guys. But let's bring up a fun reminder of everybody who couldn't quite make it over the hump after all. I mean, Lex Luger may have been, if I'm not mistaken, the first guy to fail at winning after he co-won the Royal Rumble prior to WrestleMania 10. He won it with Bret Hart because they couldn't decide who had touched first. But unlike in 2005, when that was a botched finish, that was actually the planned finish, was for both Lex and Bret to win. So kind of a strange precursor there, but Luger couldn't do it because Luger's Luger, and there's nothing to like about him except his ridiculous steroid-infused physique at the time. Shawn Michaels, WrestleMania 11, for all the hoopla and all of the hype offered for that. That was the 95 Rumble where he goes coast to coast. You're telling me he doesn't win the championship in that? That's pretty wild to remember.
I'll say they never, for all the guys who won the Rumble and then failed to win at Mania, they've never made a mistake with that booking. Because he was fighting Diesel at the time, who was hotter than ever and like the last bastion of like a decent big man. And he was absolutely the guy to have the belt on at that exact moment, even though people like to cite all the TV ratings and shit. Like for having a heel, having them not as a team anymore, stuff like that. I think that was the right decision.
Okay. Well, that was the one where Shawn got so much love by going coast to coast for the first time ever, 1-30. And it was, I think you're right, the shortest Royal Rumble of all time regardless, but it was still an amazing individual success story and go on to be a highlight real fixture for decades, that specific victory. Yeah, he even failed against Big Daddy Cool, and you're right, because Diesel was trying to get over as a competent champion. I think many people will have fun reminding folks that he was one of the worst WWE champions as far as moving the needle business-wise, but he did get that big WrestleMania win over Shawn, despite that. So very strange. Go ahead.
And the rest of the TV was trash. Like, even if Diesel was the greatest thing in wrestling, if if literally everything else on the card is fucking garbage, and Bret Hart's taking a smoke break for a minute, and all these guys like Hulk Hogan are showing up at fucking WCW. I mean, that's just how the business was.
That's the business. Why?
So next, we already mentioned The Rock at WrestleMania 2000.
Yeah.
He comes up short after getting screwed in the Fatal 4-Way. And then you got
Randy Orton.
What?
Randy Orton in 2009, right? That was another one for WrestleMania 25. Despite him having a decent build up to winning that Rumble, right? You could appreciate it despite Randy being Randy. He took on the King of Kings at WrestleMania and couldn't quite pull it out. He got denied. Oops. But
it was the right choice.
He dethroned Triple H for the WWE Championship in a 6-man tag team match at Backlash a month later. So they eventually gave it to him in like the flukiest, stupidest way possible. Why not pull the trigger at WrestleMania for Randy if you're just going to have him win it? And yes, you heard me right, a specially stipulated 6-man tag team match at Backlash.
Well, the reason is to add some intrigue, some mystery. You'd have to watch the specific match itself. The other reason is because Randy Orton sucks and is actually super fucking boring and barely ever talks. He is almost like a plastic mold of a human being. If you told me that he was an artificially created golem without actual intelligence and was just programmed by Triple H and Vince McMahon to be a pro wrestler, I would believe it.
Holy fucking shit, Sam. Really? That's how deep you would go into your hate for Orton?
He's like a clay golem, like specially sculpted to be a pro wrestler. Like, sure, he can do a split, but
He's a bona fide historical. I mean, he's a legend now, ironically, and he's been a part of plenty of quality wrestling moments that I have to think you're unpopular with that opinion. Randy at this point is a cemented legend, and
one of the worst booked superstars of all time.
We could probably have a 2-hour discussion on that alone, so I'm going to leave it right the fuck there. How about Edge at WrestleMania 26, right? Edge had won the Royal Rumble and now was going head-to-head with, I believe, judging the picture I've used to rekindle my memory, is Chris Jericho.
It's Chris Jericho.
The greatest, right? The greatest. The Ayatollah of rock and roll was the general moniker for him at that point. And he just couldn't quite win. It underdelivered, I guess, as a main event at WrestleMania.
Bullshit. And that was a great. Well, I mean, I don't think it was even. I don't think it was the final match, was it?
That's a good point. I would highly doubt that it was the final match. Mm-hmm. I don't think even at their heyday, Vince viewed Chris Jericho and Edge as top tier, right before the lights get put out, main eventer. Sadly, especially in the case of Jericho.
Yeah, the match was great. People are butthurt because they wanted Edge to win and think that Edge is so great and can do nothing wrong because he had to retire for 10 years or whatever, but he shouldn't have beaten Chris Jericho, and he shouldn't have speared Chris Jericho and allowed whoever the fuck to cash in the Money in the Bank at the time. I don't even remember. That's how much they suck. Unless it was CM Punk, I guess. Maybe I don't remember. Was that a CM Punk year?
For the Money in the Bank? No. It could have been, should have been, would have been, but that WrestleMania's Money in the Bank match was won by Jack Swagger.
Okay, I thought maybe it was Kane because I knew Kane won the Money in the Bank and then immediately cashed in. But I think he did that to Rey Mysterio, actually.
I agree, and you're right. Yep, I remember that history for sure. But Swagger cashed in the SmackDown after. That's not my photographic nerd memory. It's definitely on the article that I'm using to keep us on track. But Swagger used his Money in the Bank contract on the SmackDown following that WrestleMania after Jericho got speared through a table or something on SmackDown by Edge, and there you go.
Was bullshit. Jericho should have stayed champion. That's all I have to say about that.
I mean, Jericho is a champion in our hearts forever. Then we had Alberto Del Rio, who we don't need to dissect more. I mean, he had. I guess we could just kind of summarize that.
Nope. We can move. We've already mentioned him way too much for this podcast.
I've never agreed with you more. Batista at WrestleMania 30. I mean, so perfect segue pending, loading. We'll come back to that. Roman Reigns, WrestleMania 31 in 2015, right? That was a rough one too, wasn't it? Yeah,
2 years in a row where they realized that they just made a mistake, some of these, like the Edge versus Jericho one, you can think like, oh, we booked ourselves into a corner, or we wanna take maybe a swerve route or whatever. But these two were definitely ones where they're like, okay, we have to just atone for our sins.
This one was their second chance to try to help Daniel Bryan win the Rumble like the fans wanted. And instead they turned to perennial, you're jamming him down our throats and we don't like it guy, Roman Reigns. And yeah, that was the night The Rock came out to try to put over his cousin and raise his arm in victory. And even The Rock received boos, which, yeah, that's a really rough one. I almost would put 2015 in my pool of the worst Rumbles anyway, because that was, again, the second consecutive year that they failed to capitalize on Daniel Bryan's popularity despite it being handed straight to them at a time when they instead wanted to force feed us a brand new star who, we all know the Roman Reigns stuff. So, yeah, that one was kind of rough. But at least he didn't win the title at WrestleMania, and he couldn't have with how much hate he had behind him. That was the night that we got the greatest cash in of all time, you could argue, because it's the only one that was successful at WrestleMania. And it's got that beautiful Seth Rollins swirl with the title over his head. I love that image. I always like looking back on that. Yeah, but I assume, go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, it's one of the better cash-ins for sure. And it's one of the few times where someone cashed in the middle of a match, right? And turned it into a triple threat instead of specifically waiting for the match to end and attack whoever, lost essentially.
But boy, was it such the right answer, man. I'll never forget when we were watching this match that we really didn't want to be watching anyway, Brock and Roman. And that music hits and out comes Seth and the crowd is just losing their absolute shit. I loved that because it needed it. They did do a good job. For what it's worth, if they fucked up the Royal Rumble both those years, they got the last moments of their WrestleManias correct. For fucking sure. Shinsuke Nakamura, tragically, we may want to use this as a potential segue later, but he won in 2018, and we can pass for now if you want to, because I know this one has kind of a hot spot in your heart, doesn't it?
I mean, as far as the Rumble goes, it's one of the better Rumbles. As far as Shinsuke losing to AJ Styles, like, I would have preferred to see Shinsuke win, but I don't remember being particularly hyped for this WrestleMania at all, like top to bottom for this card. So this was a pretty forgettable year in general for me.
Oh, interesting. But as far as the Rumble, we might as well pause long enough for you to explain what you liked about it.
Oh, the 2018 Rumble was like an island in stormy seas, because it's like the fucking 6 years before it. They're pretty much all trash aside from CM Punk showing up and using a microphone. They all have pretty terrible winners. All guys who like Batista, like Randy Orton, like we already talked about it a little bit, but 2018 is the 1 year sandwiched in between a bunch of shitty Rumbles where like there's actual storytelling that utilizes the rules of the Royal Rumble, that utilizes different feuds that are going on, and it's not just like one feud that is tied into the Rumble. Like other people get to actually do character work. The final four, or actually it's the final six, I think, is really good, because it's like John Cena, Rey Mysterio, and is it Randy Orton? It's like three old guys versus three new guys. Okay. There's a lot of stuff to like about this Royal Rumble, a lot, including the fact that Shinsuke wins, who I didn't really believe it. Like, it was one of the few times where everyone was like, well, Shinsuke's going to win. And I was like, that'd be a little surprising, just because I didn't think that they were like fully behind him, but he was definitely hotter than the sun for that year.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was super excited to see him win, and there was a lot of speculation that he was the right choice for the job, which is fun. I mean, it's not very often that such an international star, I suppose, gets to win the Royal Rumble. And this was 2018 when he wasn't the only one, right? I believe Asuka also won the 2018 Women's Royal Rumble, the first of its kind. So it was an all Japan winners year. And that is unprecedented and extremely unique. And the Women's Royal Rumble was great. It's on my list of favorite Royal Rumbles with Asuka's victory because it was totally the correct winner. And it was such a historic night to see the first all women's Royal Rumble for sure. That one just kind of saunters in and gets to be among my top tier. But yeah, I was super stoked for Shinsuke because it was the kind of win that we always kind of wish would happen in the Rumble, where it's a guy who isn't being primed as the top star, but may just break through. And instead, of course, they gave him a low blow gimmick.
Yeah, and of course, like the feuds with AJ Styles after that were just Nakamura losing over and over, and it was some of the worst fucking TV they've ever done.
Yeah, it is too bad.
Not a lot of good came out of that good Rumble, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah, and I'm not going to sit here and say you're wrong whatsoever. It's really too bad because they almost undid the good that they produced by giving Shinsuke that nod. It's almost like, why bother? Simply because of the prestige he had out in Japan, or simply because Triple H believed in him the way he did in NXT. Like, why would you bother making him a main event star just to literally turn him into somebody who will cheat their way out of their own golden opportunity? Just silly. The rest of that card, though, or the rest of that group in that Royal Rumble was really strong. Reading names up and down. I'm a little biased because, yesterday's mid card is today's top card, but like we had Finn Balor in this one. Rusev was still pretending to be near the top of the card. You had guys like Rhino adding seasoning. We had Andrade made his like first appearance, I think, as like an NXT
he was
cameo.
NXT champion.
Yep. Bray Wyatt was in this one, which I know you're gonna just.
Who cares? He never did anything. Everything he does, people hate, and yet they like him.
But the back 12 in that Rumble were so good. Seth Rollins, he was a machine. We had Woken Matt Hardy, who was a fun character, at least for a day. We had the Hurricane come back and make a freaking cameo, which you can always appreciate. Adam Cole, baby, came in at number 23.
Up Adam Cole.
What's that, brother?
Taped up Adam Cole. He was taped up from his hardcore match with Aleister Black.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's true. The night before
NXT
at NXT
was so good back then.
Oh my God, you're so right. Yeah,
having NXT takeovers before WWE pay-per-views was such a mistake because the takeovers were always killing it.
I would so go back and relive those NXTs anytime. They were the best, and Cole was a big part of that. But then there's Orton, and then there's Miz and Mysterio and Reigns, and Dolph Ziggler got the 30th entrance.
Gosh, what a fucking crime! Talk about a guy who should have won it. Won it all.
Right. Asuka also failed to win the women's championship. So even though All Japan won the Rumble, All Japan lost the WrestleMania because she couldn't get over the hurdle. That is, the Charlotte Flair, arguably the greatest legitimate female athlete in WWE history.
Also took away from Asuka's undefeated streak, which was stupid as fuck.
Yeah. Only somebody like, Ric Flair's daughter would get that kind of treatment.
And where is she now? What has she been doing now, Got too big for her britches, just like Daddy. Decided she's bigger than WWE.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when's the last time Charlotte did anything to justify her spot? She's always supposedly relevant. She can always just show up, and just be entered into a title picture. And all of her promos are just about how she's the greatest and it's no joke. And then they book her to be that, it's not like a shitty heel gimmick. It's not like a snide heel thing. And it's just like, when has she done anything really remarkable? Like, anytime people talk about women's revolution matches, it only involves her if it's like a triple threat or a fatal four-way or a tag match or something.
You done? I mean, sorry, the thing about Charlotte Flair that she does to make her earn her spot, no, is not just her blood, but honestly is her absolute undeniable athleticism, presence, and character. Like, sure, her name goes into that character, and whether you think it's bullshit or not, it's wrestling 101. But from the way she struts around the ring in the early stages of a match to the way she fires up and has one of the most interesting, like, deep move sets, like, in wrestling. She's got the natural selection. Listen, man, I'll help you out.
A terrible snap. What?
Look, she's got the figure eight. She's got the natural selection. She's won with the running big boot. I know, which is ridiculous, but she's won with it. I hate to tell you this.
These are all bad moves.
She's got that beautiful corkscrew. She hits on groups of people on the outside of the ring. She's got a sick moonsault. Everything she's got the spear. She's got natural intensity. She's the finest female athlete in wrestling history, period. And people just see it. You don't have to agree with me. It's just a fact.
Moves. I don't understand.
One more time?
You just named all of the moves that I don't like up in her repertoire.
I don't. That's not my problem. That's your problem because she wins matches with them, and I'm sorry, man. The matches are great. She's that.
I bet you think a Claymore is a good finish too.
And then finally, Edge at WrestleMania 37. Yeah, you're right. I moved on. Edge at WrestleMania 37, he couldn't win it the second time he won the Royal Rumble. That's sad. Statistically, when most of the time the winner of a Royal Rumble becomes a WWE champion, of course, at this point, he'd already been an 10-time WWE champion. Edge still couldn't do it because at WrestleMania 37, despite winning the Rumble, he was literally stacked on top of Daniel Bryan and pinned by Roman. How wild is that?
Yeah, that was it was a shitty year in general. I didn't really think it was a good time for him to win the Rumble, and then him just getting stacked in like the triple threat at the Mania is becoming more and more common, and it just, I don't know, that one certainly didn't hit.
Right. Well, that main event was hollow in a way. Only because, the most beloved duo of stars that they could compile at that point, I just returned from neck surgery, Edge, and, I just returned from neck surgery, Daniel Bryan. He took both those heroes and put them under Roman to establish Roman to who he is still, remarkably, still today. Like, right now, Roman, based off of stacking those two on top of each other and getting that pin, he's still riding the heel heat from that. Literally, that was the catalyst in a way. It's gnarly when you think about it, but that's how long he's been this dominant. And now at long last here in 2023, our eye is on this Rumble because we're assuming whoever wins this one is going to be finally the guy to end the heat that he, like, to end the run that the heat that he got from that match gave him. I know that was confusing, but the point is, like, this is wild how long Roman's been the top of the mountain. And it all really mentally for me began when he won that match at WrestleMania over Daniel and Edge. Like, wild how long he's been this strong. I don't think we've seen a champion this strong in my lifetime. So, wild.
I mean, they've booked Cena to be pretty close.
I don't think he ever made a full year.
Like, if you look at like length of runs, Roman's definitely getting up there for sure.
Yeah, I don't know if Cena had a 2-year run, right?
He definitely did. I think he's got a 400 day-ish, but he's got a 3-year run.
I simply must look because
he's also got a lot where he would drop it for like a pay-per-view and then go on another year-long run. So, like for a guy like Cena and guys like Roman Reigns, like today's world where guys just drop belts and pick them back up pretty commonly, you got to look at like how many days out of every year were they champion. You can't even count like number of title reigns anymore.
John Cena's longest run as a world champion was 380 days.
Okay, 400-ish.
Right, just beyond a year. When you think about that and what Roman has done recently, you obviously know where the chips lie on that. But I remember that 380-day reign was a big deal because it was all about eclipsing JBL's historically long reign at the time, which, of course, Cena got his meteoric star level from being served it up by a trash heel like JBL. Or not trash, because he was a good heel for being able to create a star like Cena. It's just nobody expected him to be a good heel enough to do that. But again, I know you're going to trip over my biasness. Because
is it trash if I turn the TV off?
Yeah, it is trash. It's totally trash.
Then that makes Charlotte a trash heel. So moving on.
Oh my God. You're ridiculous.
Moving on.
Fine. Let's start bringing it home, because we're getting close to the point where we're getting to our 2-hour point, and I love to really punch it. We skipped over it just a few moments ago because I said it'd be a great segue, but here is my personal pick for the worst Royal Rumble that I've ever taken in, and that was the 2014 Royal Rumble, the precursor to WrestleMania 30, which is one of my favorite nights of wrestling history in general. But the Rumble itself was so bad because it was the best example of when WWE 150,000% missed the mark on what the fans were looking for. And you definitely don't need me to probably hem and haw about it for you, Sam, but our listeners need to know, in case they were under a rock that year or not yet a fan themselves, that was the year when Daniel Bryan was supposed to win because his overwhelming popularity was so high that he ended up abducting WrestleMania 30 because they wanted instead to give it to Batista, who was returning a la,
Oh, yeah, you got to make a star, right? It's for guys to be made into stars. So that's why Batista had to win.
Oh, throw up, man. It was the worst. Not only do we get a guy who hasn't been in the business in, 5 years, 6 years, could be more. I don't know. I don't care. I'm not a hater of Batista as a whole, like, canon, but I am not a lover either. I thought he was best in his earliest stages, Evolution on up until they did away with blood. You know what I mean? Because he was inspired then. He was really good at that time, and I was a fan. But coming back from Hollywood just to do the Rumble and get the win over Daniel Bryan not even getting to appear, despite being the most popular star in the industry, and being humbled, of course, Batista was, by the backlash from that. I mean, I feel bad for him for having been the not Daniel Bryan in that scenario. That was a night that people were so pissed. Was it? I think that was the night Rey Mysterio was number 30, who was returning in his own right, and literally nobody was happy to see him.
Got booed.
So booed, right? It was either that or the following year against Roman. Either way, like, they made the error twice, and this was the first time. And like, Daniel Bryan needed to win that Rumble, and he didn't. And that is just so bad. That match was so hard to love. That was the match I almost stopped believing that the Rumble could be good for me. Worst Rumble 2014. Go ahead. Weigh on in.
I mean, 2014 is maybe the most talked about just because of how bad it is.
Right.
It's like it's one that you have to bring up every time you mention bad Rumbles. You know? It's the first one you think of when you think of WWE hating its own fan base. And just
right. Yeah, at least in this generation.
And like, it's the kind of thing where, again, pulling double duty wasn't super common before. It had only happened a couple times prior to this, although it was very close, it was in close proximity to 2014 where it was happening. But I remember sitting there watching this with you and saying, like, I don't think Daniel's coming out again.
Yeah, I know.
There was maybe one or two guys who pulled double duty on that pay-per-view, but Daniel Bryan certainly wasn't one of them, and it wasn't like it was in years prior. So,
yeah. And that was the year, by the way. I've pulled up our entrance, guys. And yeah, that was the year Rey Mysterio was number 30, and everybody was just extremely upset about it. And Batista himself came out at 28, which is, the bullshit Ronda Rousey win in 2022. Like, it's an equally garbage win, Like, of all the years to not have a garbage win, they did it with Batista instead of Daniel Bryan. Unfucking believable. I obviously still get hot literally thinking about it. It is such shit that they would even think that we would be on board for that just because what? Batista's a Hollywood star? Whoop-de-damn-do, Basil. Like, we've seen Batista do his thing. We haven't seen him do his thing in several years. That doesn't mean, a sit-down powerbomb is going to be better than the emotional connection we've developed with this character throughout the last 365 days plus. Like, remarkable how tone deaf they were for that to happen. And I do remember you being like, man, I'm just warning you.
Yeah.
Like, you were really trying to have my back. And we both love Daniel Bryan. We both understand why this sucked. What a crap year. I mean, and it didn't have to be. The build up into it, man, there was so much hype for the Rumble because we thought we knew what was happening. This was the year CM Punk and Seth started off. You have Damian Sandow getting way more momentum than he should have simply through his commitment to his various characters. Cody was in this match. Kane was early on. Alexander Rusev debuted. We had Dean Ambrose somewhere near the back third of that. Goldust continues to make his perennial appearances, but Kevin Nash had a cameo, which is, if it was fun in 2000, whenever you were mentioning 2011, it was certainly fun in 2014. You had little El Torito, who was hot off of just winning, or having one of the finest moments in a little person's career, I would say, when he was the big focal point of the WeLC match. Not too long prior to that with the 3-man band. You're right. I spent airtime talking about the WeLC match. We had Cesaro doing his thing. Luke Harper was number 22 as a fun choice. John Bradleyfield had a cameo, which always makes me happy. Del Rio, who I don't know why I said his name. Batista came out at 28 and fucked everything. Fucked it right in the mouth. Not that there was a whole lot in that back card to be excited about because we were just watching chances for Daniel Bryan go by. But fuck, man, what a shitty match. Your turn. What is your definitive worst Rumble? I hope we haven't covered it already.
Man, well, it's a toss-up between a couple. I mean, that one's certainly on there. I wouldn't pick it just because I don't want to pick the most easy, most obvious choice. But I think if you didn't pick it, I might have. Only because I think you would also pick one of my other choices. But it really comes down to two for me. And the 2012 Royal Rumble was far from my favorite, but I think the 2017 Rumble is actually the worst of all.
Okay.
And it's probably because the 2012 one was just not quite as offensive, and I think it was the first time Kofi Kingston had his highlight Royal Rumble moment.
Yeah, he handstanded, right? And
yes,
Michael Cole's like, that was the most incredible thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, which it might not be the most incredible thing ever seen, but it was. It breathed fresh air into the Royal Rumble and created a mini legacy for Kofi. He became something that people look out for an entire decade. To this day, people await the Kofi Kingston spot in the Royal Rumble. And I think in 2014, he didn't even have that, right? 2012 and 2013, he had really cool moments. But I don't even remember the cool Kofi Kingston moment in 2014. So,
there have been Rumbles where he didn't get that. I think this past Rumble 2022, when Brock's unceremoniously eliminated him without that moment, was one of the more disappointing in our memory. But yeah, I think 2012, which by the way was won by Sheamus over Chris Jericho, if you're looking for the result of that one, that puts it near the bottom for my, Y2J loving friend here. That was the birth of the Kofi spot. And, the crowd popped in the moment. Like, they hadn't seen a handstand to escape elimination yet either. So there is something to be said to the value there, 2012. Yeah. But now you're talking about 2017, which I can agree with you, deserves to be somewhere in the basement of rankings here, because Randy Orton got, again, the win in a forgotten Rumble, en route to a forgotten WrestleMania match that was middle of the card, that is only remembered for the ridiculous use of projection effects as a justification for throwing Orton off at all, which it didn't, because he RKO'd Bray 8 minutes into the match to win the match. Like, it was just, we already talked about it, how trashy it was. But 2017, you had Big Cass starting at number 1, who was trying to get over. Chris Jericho was number 2. And if I remember, Bud, that was an actual return from nowhere to WWE, right? Like, out of nowhere, which Jericho has done a couple times. But that one, nobody expected him to be number 2. He was nowhere near WWE at that time. Correct me if I'm wrong. So that could have been really great. That could have been super great. And I'm not sure how long Jericho lasted that year, but not long enough when you start to move on and see Kalisto, Mojo Rawley, Jack Gallagher, a trio of essential nobodies. No offense to the very valid athleticism of a Kalisto or the fun character work of Jack Gallagher. They just weren't going to win this match. Mark Henry got number 6, Strowman at number 7. They took each other out, so whatever. Sami Zayn at number 8 worked harder than he needed to before leaving. Big Show at number 9, who probably had a short cameo. I think he and Strowman were also part of that. And so much. Sorry, do you want to weigh in?
Well, yeah. So the thing about it is that I think that this speaks to a little bit of bias, because there might be Rumbles that are strictly worse than both 2012 and 2017, but the comparisons and why they're important to me and why they're memorable and leave such a bad taste in my mouth, are because of things like Jericho making that return and starting the match. Jericho survives till the final 4 in both the 2012 and the 2017 Rumbles. I was so stoked. I was so ready for Jericho to make a return and win his first ever Royal Rumble. I was super ready for him to be in the final 2 of 2012 and win his first ever Royal Rumble, and there was actually some really good sequences in the 2012 one. So it has just a few more things, I think, that bump it up. But when it comes to 2017, it had the most promise and then didn't deliver on it. Guys like Dean Ambrose were so hot. Guys like Dolph Ziggler had a chance to kind of resurge their career. Goldberg had come back, and Goldberg had an opportunity to make a big impact because his gimmick is fairly simple. Spear a guy, drop a guy, pin a guy. But all of these things, everything birthed from this Rumble completely deletes anything that was noteworthy. There's so much crap, basement card guys like Ty Dillinger and James Ellsworth and Baron Corbin in the middle. There's people who would never move on to do anything, like Kalisto and Mojo Rawley, like you talked about, taking up time. The Wyatt family stuff in this was total garbage. And it was just another reason where it's anytime we add a 4th member to the Wyatt family, it doesn't actually do anything or mean anything. It was a complete fucking waste of time. They booked them to all enter, right next to each other, or one entrant apart or some shit. So they were all together just so they could fight each other and take up screen time for a feud that didn't even need to be in the Rumble. And then, of course, it ends up with Orton winning it. Like, it just, I don't know. Like, there was nothing good that came out of this Rumble. I don't remember any of the spots. I don't, I went back to watch a little bit of it and couldn't find anything to like from it. No, I take it back. Jack Gallagher was in that Rumble. I watched. He was in there early, and he did some cool stuff. Everyone I've ever introduced to Jack Gallagher thinks that he's entertaining. So there's that.
Sure.
Non-wrestling fans love Jack Gallagher. But yeah, there's nothing. There's nothing about this Rumble except people taking spots from guys who could have had it.
Yeah. Well, I remember watching that Rumble thinking, I'm not sure who's going to win this, even though guys like Undertaker were at number 29 and Goldberg 28, Lesnar 26, pet favorite Luke Harper at 25. Randy
do you have all the entrants in front of you? Was Undertaker in this Rumble?
Undertaker was 29?
29, okay, yeah. I don't remember him even being in this Rumble. And he enters at 29 and doesn't make it to the final four. Like,
that does seem a little cattywampus, doesn't it?
Yeah, it just there's so much that could have been done with this Rumble. I'm a huge Luke Harper fan, and I was waiting for this to be like his breakout role. I was waiting for this to be like he gets to leave the faction and go on to be, a main eventer, and he would win like mid-card titles, but it wasn't like on his path to the top. It was like because they had no one else. There's something so weird about their misuse of Harper. And I'm so grateful that he's kind of gone on to be like this generation's Eddie Guerrero, a couple years ago, and with his untimely passing. Luke Harper was infinitely underrated, and God bless Brody Lee, and may forever rest in peace and be cemented in the annals of wrestling history. It's wonderful when I do get to turn into AEW, and I often hear somebody start the show by saying it's Wednesday. You know what that means? Making a reference to Brody Lee's constant tweeting every day of what day of the week it was, and that we knew what that meant. And he never exacerbated on it. And he's just one of those really cool guys who looked at the universe different that everybody could appreciate. Sorry. That's the first time in a while I think we got to trip over a Luke Harper topic. But there is nothing else good about this Rumble. Like, I'd have to go back and watch highlights of it to pick out like a singular moment.
You're right.
And what really hurts me is the rest of this card was pretty good for an era where wrestling was pretty shit. For an era where wrestling just like wasn't that good. I thought these matches were pretty good. Like, I found myself watching, wanting to watch other matches over the Royal Rumbles, going into these pay-per-views. And maybe it's because I've just tried to watch literally every Royal Rumble in preparation for these podcasts. But like, I so much would have rather watched Kevin Owens versus Roman Reigns with Chris Jericho in a shark cage. That match is surprisingly good for a Roman Reigns match. And this involves Kevin Owens in the opener again. Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn in a handicap match versus AJ Styles is only watchable because of how good Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn are and how over they were as heels. If you watch that match, nobody is fucking cheering for AJ Styles. They are cheering for the heels in that match. Sami Zayn was over to the fucking moon and back, even though that they were heels, even back then. So like, there's so many good matches on Royal Rumble pay-per-views that get overshadowed. And sometimes I think that can really mess with the perception of a Royal Rumble itself. I think the 2012 card overall was better than the 2017 card. So like, they're very close in my mind for like the worst Rumbles, but a lot of that can be because you had a really good pay-per-view end on such a downer note.
Yeah, it's true. It was a weird one. I remember not hating Randy's choice. I thought it was kind of a strange one to give him number 2. It felt a little bit out of the blue because there were other guys who seemed primed to step up to Bray to end his title run, or at least maybe even give him a win. But yeah, fuck that. So yeah, I get it. Historically, I can see why you'd slide it here in your basement. And I'm it's too bad. You do look at the participants in that specific Rumble, and I'd say 20 of them were quality superstars who could put on great matches and hold a candle to the idea of winning. Sure,
the
other
titles to basement carders now.
What's that, brother?
That's because they give titles to basement carders.
I mean, Jinder Mahal, right? Like, that's all I need to say. I mean, Jinder's look is great, and he obviously did a lot of work en route to that WWE Championship win that has nothing to do with our established topic to this point. But yeah, Jinder had no good reason for being that champion at all. No offense. I mean, the Colossus is a terrible move. Okay, man, let's bring it home. I'm excited. This is it. On the other side of the spectrum, we want to give you the main event of the evening, folks, and go over our favorite Royal Rumble ever, each of us. And I would love to give Sam the chance to feed off of how I feel about this idea. I got to go, strangely enough, with a Royal Rumble that I think did an amazing job storytelling through. It's actually a pair. I'm going to go two. Because of this kind of storytelling trope for me. It's when they do a good job of, yes, I suppose, telegraphing what's going to happen, but then having it happen and it being special. I'll start with the 2020 Royal Rumble. I loved the Drew McIntyre win. I'll admit it, I did. 1,000,000%. It was the right time to make him a winner. It was the right time to make Brock a loser. They have this fantastic little storyline of dominant world champion Brock Lesnar, untouchable world champion Brock Lesnar, spending the first half of the entire match punking fools, right? Many of whom he had wisps of history with. Like Shelton Benjamin comes in, and that's one of the only guys Brock pretends like he's not going to crush. And then he crushes him, right? There's the little moment when he first comes face to face with Keith Lee, and it's like, oh, look at this. It's a big boy. Okay. Yeah, let's go. And Keith Lee out for a second before getting dumped. Braun Strowman, I think they actually go out together, right? Like at least Keith hangs with Brock long enough for Braun to come in, and then Brock somehow gets both of them out. Like there was just so much quality to the storytelling in the front half that you're so ready to hate this Rumble. For me, I remember I was so ready to hate the Rumble, right? I was so ready to be like, fuck, they're really going to actually do this whole Brock steamrolls everybody story. And I think
that's what they should have done. That's how that match should have ended.
How should have ended how? Forgive me?
It should have ended with Brock just eliminating people one by one until he had a one-on-one match with Drew McIntyre and F5s him over the top rope.
Oh my goodness. And you would have given it to Lesnar, and the champion is dominant through the Rumble, so there's no point to having a WrestleMania main event.
If they would have done that, it would have actually been my pick.
Of best ever?
Yeah, it makes my bottom 5 because the first half is so good, but then as soon as Lesnar's eliminated, it immediately tanks.
Well, I got to be honest with you. I disagree because even though it was all to eventually build to the win for McIntyre, that back half was okay. You're gonna probably laugh because I'll admit it. It's more forgettable. The just the moment of him watching or sailing Brock Lesnar over the top rope. And the pop that came from it, man, it was one of the final pops before the pandemic took crowds away. And I remember going back and rewatching that pop several times because I missed it. Okay. I missed it during the pandemic. I missed it during the Thunderdome era. I missed it because that was a star creating pop for me. And I wanted that for Drew in that moment because of the really badass story he's had in real life.
Like the big up and coming star. He was already with a rocket strapped to him.
Which arguably you may say didn't actually, I mean, I don't know if it took off all that heavily. Like, yes, he did end up winning that WrestleMania's main event cleanly over Lesnar. but it was in front of those screens, right? It wasn't in front of the audience. He still hasn't had that meteoric moment, despite this extremely awesome story of being a failed WWE, prospect to go to the independents and find whom you are and fill out physically and come back a completely different man enough to fulfill the prophecy. Like, that's fucking cool. That's
At least
such
he
a
wasn't already a
cool.
champion before that.
He had been an NXT champion. He had not been WWE champion.
Yeah,
I'm willing to bet my money on it.
Before.
One more time.
At least he hadn't been a champion before.
Right. So a lot went right with that one. I love that Rumble. I do. And part of it's because pandemic life fucked with the rest of the world for a while and made me miss pops like Drew's entrance and victory and elimination of Lesnar. But that's the thing, man. Sometimes real life affects the way wrestling is viewed, and it works on this one. It totally does. And not to mention the path to that victory honestly isn't that shitty on paper. Listen to these entrants, okay? Miz, established, upper mid Carter. Go ahead, give me your quip one more time.
Shitty basement Carter.
Oh my God, that's your opinion. That's another 2-hour conversation someday.
That's all this is. It's everyone's opinion. Do you really want to have an opinion aligned with Vince McMahon? Is that what you're telling me? You'd rather side with Vince McMahon?
Oh my goodness Christ, no, I don't. Not often, anyway.
Oh, there you go.
But hold on, you had Styles, you had Ziggler, Carl Anderson was one of the few guys who was forgettable. Edge, King Corbin, Matt Riddle.
We're really gonna do this?
More Luke Gallows. I mean, poor Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows. They don't carry as much weight with me as some of these other guys. Orton, Reigns, Owens, Aleister Black, Samoa Joe, Seth Rollins. That was the path past Brock Lesnar. Drew got through a pretty damn good back half of a Rumble as far as names on paper. Okay. That's my humble opinion. Feel free to debunk it. I'm going to cop out real quick and tell you that I do have a second Rumble that contends here, but it's the only one I've seen in person. And it's the female one. It's the 2019 Becky Lynch winning the Royal Rumble after taking the place of Lana, who'd been incapacitated by, I think it was Nia Jax, because nobody likes her. And Becky had lost the Raw Championship opportunity against Sasha Banks earlier in the night. And everybody in the fandom was like, oh man, okay, I guess she's not going to get her big moment tonight. And about when Lana started to limp to the ring, I thought, this is it. This is the moment. And then it happened. So I'm going to wrap up my half of this by saying I'm going to give Drew the nod because of historical ramifications around the world. That was my favorite Rumble, remembering what it was like to have fans in the stands for such big pops, but also my own fandom in the stands, getting to see Becky Lynch get her opportunity too. Those are my favorites. Go ahead, Sam. You can tear down my two favorites. Give me your favorite. Let's take this baby home.
It's so tough to pick an actual favorite. A lot of times I think it really does come down to just picking your favorite winners or picking your favorite final two. So, of course, I could easily gravitate towards Royal Rumble 2007 just because it's got the most rewatchable final two.
Yeah, that's a good choice.
Yeah, Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. I could gravitate towards my personal bias, which is one of the first I think it's the first Royal Rumble I watched on pay-per-view, and I think it's yours as well. And it featured one of my favorite wrestlers winning, which is Royal Rumble 2004 when Chris Benoit won, going from first to 30, which should be a much bigger deal, but, fucking Rey Mysterio did it. So
as my first Rumble I ever saw, 2004 definitely got consideration. So I totally respect where you're coming from with that. That was a really, really, really fun year too. Keep going.
Yeah. A lot of my favorite Royal Rumble moments are unfortunately just slapped in the middle of really forgettable or otherwise bad Rumbles. CM Punk's work with the Straight Edge Society and the New Nexus both. And both of those Rumbles is just really good stuff. Like having a faction like dominate a Royal Rumble is kind of cool, you know, but it's not a great Royal Rumble afterwards. I even said 2020 could have easily been my pick if Lesnar had at least gone to like the final 5 or 6 or something. Like if he had just gone like almost all the way even, I think it could have been a much cooler Rumble. But if I have to pick one, man, I've watched so many Rumbles. They're starting to actually all kind of run together now.
I believe you. Yeah, you can. There is such a thing as too many Rumbles. I have been there.
Yeah, I think, man, I think if I really had to just pick like a singular Rumble itself. Okay, is Three Faces of Foley 98? It's 98, right?
Yeah, that would be 98.
Yeah, I think this one isn't like a lot of people's favorites, but I think it's my favorite. It's the one I go back to watch the most.
Wow.
He doesn't really do a lot. Like, even though Foley gets to enter 3 times, he doesn't really do a lot, but it is the Rumble I search up the most. It's the Rumble that when I'm looking to watch a card, when I'm looking to watch like the whole pay-per-view itself, this is one that I watch. It has the Intercontinental Championship between Ken Shamrock and The Rock, who I think is still Rocky Maivia at the time. You know, it's got Legion of Doom versus New Age Outlaws, and it's like the capstone. It's like when I started to watch wrestling, and it involves a ton of characters and a ton of personalities that I didn't really watch. Like, I didn't really watch Legion of Doom wrestling, you know. They're very much like before my time, and so I think it stays fresh a little bit that way. And then, you know, the main event, what is it? The main event for that is the casket match between Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. So bias is fully on the table. It could be because of the event itself. It could be because of the pay-per-view itself. I remember this was a huge thing where, you know, kids were talking at school and like I'd see magazine clips and the highlights on the cable TV of the casket being lit on fire. So there's so much surrounding this where the Royal Rumble match itself might not be the actual best thing about this card, but I loved watching Mick Foley bring weapons to the ring to start the match, and he fights Terry Funk, and they just have a hardcore match to start things off. Like, I'm a huge gimmick fan.
Love it. That's a great choice.
Yeah, you know, they just like team up on people and eliminate goons who come to the ring so they can continue beating each other up. The Rock actually does pull double duty all the way back in 1998, and he showed up. I remember
still Rocky Maivia at the time.
Right. I remember. This is at the time where I wouldn't know to appreciate this gimmick at the, you know, back then or anything, or for a long time. Or, you know, I didn't get to watch this Rumble until like the mid 2000s when I met like, you know, my teenage wrestling fans who had shit saved on their hard drive. And so Jeff Jarrett shows up with like the NWA championship, the North American championship, even, I think. And Jim Cornette makes an appearance. Mick Foley comes back and gets his revenge on Terry Funk. Where is it? I think Ken Shamrock also shows up in this Rumble, actually. I'm just running through like all these different moments, and that's the thing is like it still remains memorable to me, even though these things aren't particularly exciting. It's not like no Kofi spot. There's no one getting choke slammed off the apron through a table that Sabu himself fucking set up. It's actually one of the most ridiculous spots when Kane does the choke slam elimination to Sabu, like. But so there's a point where the Nation of Domination, I think, is all in the ring together, and you know, we just talked about how like having a faction dominate the Rumble can be really interesting. But like, it's just, I don't know. I think it's one of the best Rumbles, and it doesn't have to have like big main event guys, like guys who have won world championships just because they're the only person around during the worst years of wrestling. Cough those. But you still have guys like the early Rock. Like you have Rock on his come up. You have Mick Foley like a year before being like a real main eventer, right? Like before being like entrenched in the main event scene. You've got Farouk on his final days, or maybe not final days, but you've got like the tail end of the Nation of Domination still around.
He was definitely in pass the torch mode.
Yeah, Owen Hart was doing some of his best stuff. This is like, Owen Hart well after the screw job. So he's like out of his post Bret Hart leaving push, but he's still doing really good work. Like, I don't know, man. I feel like I have to sell people on this one because I don't think it gets talked about a lot outside of Mick Foley entered 3 times, but it comes down to the Rock and Austin. It's like the spark of the real Rock and Austin feud, probably. At least, I mean, depending on where you want to stick that pin.
Sure.
You know, I think it involves like some of the most iconic stunner sells by The Rock. Like he's always taken it like in a crazy over the top way. It's I don't know. It's very memorable to me.
Well, you talk about these early episodes of our conversations being about finding our fandom, and I think a couple of fun themes are starting to emerge in both of our mindsets. Your theme, first of all, celebrates Mick Foley far more than I think you might even realize how subconsciously you appreciate that man. And he has been a big part of like your earliest memories as a wrestling fan. You caught a Mankind promo and wondered what the hell this guy was talking about, right? One of your earliest memories. And then this being one of the most historic, nobody else has done 3 Faces of Foley kind of things. And I look up and down this lineup and, if I wanted to be a tool right now, I'd point out how it is pretty forgettable as far as names are concerned. But it's not about that. It's about the memories made while you enjoy this specific medium. And I can respect that this one had plenty to offer you going back in time to relive it. I can respect, it's Austin's, I think, second win, right? He won 97.
He went back to back.
He went back to back, not a commonality. I don't think it had been done since, well, actually, Michaels did 95 and 96, didn't he? Kind of weird that way.
When it comes down to like booking of stars and rumbles, I mean, my stance on it. It's just pretty obvious.
Sure. I respect it though, man. I think there's a lot of fun characters in this lineup. Now that I look at it, there's a lot of guys who are, I don't remember who 8 Ball is, for example, but I respect that, from your perspective, it had some value to it. For me, I love the rumbles where I think I know what's going to happen and that I'm right. So there you go. I love it when I think Becky Lynch is going to come out and take somebody's spot to win it, which is not a commonality. I don't know how many guys or gals have gotten that storyline. I don't think it's many. And she really didn't have to come out and do it, but WWE booked it that way cleverly, knowing that in 2019 in Chase Field in Phoenix, Arizona, I had come all this way hoping that Becky was going to have her night because I have a thing for redheads who kick ass in the ring. And then with 2020, of course McIntyre had to be the guy because he was one of the few dudes who physically looked like he could stand toe-to-toe with Brock and was poised to finally pay off his historic redemption right before the world changed. So we're learning a little bit about each other in this list, in this breakdown, in this discussion. And I think it's a beautiful thing that you could need to put over your own idea pretty hard in order for people to believe it. You could have picked 2007 when Undertaker got his long overdue victory. You could have picked one of the various, other Austin victories, right? 2001's Rumble was sick too, right? There's so many things that cliche could have come out of our mouths here.
97 has an arguably better finish. When he gets thrown out and the refs don't see it and then he goes back in to eliminate Bret Hart, like that is a strictly better finish than 98.
Well, there you go. I
have to comment really quick. You said you don't know who 8 Ball is. And I just have to flex a little bit on you. 8 Ball was one half of the Blue Brothers, who were also the Bruise Brothers in ECW, and later went to WCW and became a parody of Pat Patterson and Gerald Briscoe, basically like lampooning Vince McMahon's Two Stooges, and they named them Creative Control, and that's how I know 8-Ball. He's one half of Creative Control, which was just WCW finally giving up and saying, we're just going to take shots at WWF as much as we can.
You know what? I love it. That should have been your trivia of the week, honestly.
Yeah, maybe.
Damn. Speaking of which, I think we have done all we can to make sure you all understand what makes a good or bad Rumble in our minds. Sometimes we contradicted ourselves, and sometimes we contradicted each other, but that's all the fun in pro wrestling fandom. It's all part of being behind this wonderful art form. So as we get ready to wrap up, my dude, I know you like to bring trivia every week. You got something for me?
I guess we were supposed to do the trivia at the beginning, so I totally forgot what I was going to have. We should really do it at the beginning.
Friends, we're going to do it at the beginning next time. And next time, I understand we're going to be covering more about the Rumble, this time speculating 2023's results themselves.
Even though we already know who's going to win, it's pretty obvious.
There's some exciting thoughts. We'll break down maybe the 5 or 6 different folks who look like they could potentially do it.
Then we'll listen to all the podcasts of people who talk to insiders and spoil every single detail, so there's basically no reason to watch.
This is literally the 1 week where I lay off my Bleacher Report and I lay off my WrestleZone. I lay off all of the sources, man. This is the 1 week where I'm trying super hard, even though it's depending on who you are, it seems super obvious. So we'll find out how obvious it truly is next week when we break down that topic. Sam Tate, the ace that runs this place. You got anything else to close us out with?
Nope, just I don't really have socials to follow. I just got the Twitch channel where I stream mostly card game content, and you've got the link for your art down below in the description if you guys want to buy some specially made commissioned art pieces. You can check that out. Other than that, man, I think it's just farewell for now.
I love it. Guys, share, subscribe. Remember that.
Comment down below your favorite Rumble. That's a good engagement tactic. Yeah,
I agree. Comment your favorite Rumble. Comment how wrong we were on our favorites. Tell us what about hit wrestling's or Royal Rumbles at least that hook you, and maybe we missed the mark. But either way, we'll see you next week when we break down more Royal Rumble predictions, more exciting wrestling conversation. And my name is Warren Sprague. That was the ace that runs the place, Sam Tate. And we will talk to you all the next time this match is scheduled for one fall.
Peace.